All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our office hours here on the Academy. Finally back together, both of us here at the same time. It's been a few weeks now when we are basically.
This makes me happy.
Yeah.
Yes.
Happiness indeed. So another thing that makes us happy is it's trailer time.
Mm-hmm.
All right, here we are back again. It's office hours times. It is Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. Central Time, and it was bloody snowing today. It's not supposed to do that this time of year, but
Yet again, they didn't ask us if that should be allowed. Otherwise, I think we would have told them no.
it's not okay.
No.
But there are some exciting news in our industry. I know you have been researching a few things, or looking up a few things, I should say, maybe.
Absolutely. A few pretty exciting things that I came across this week. If you want to go ahead and share my screen. And while you're doing that, I will just reiterate, I'm so happy to be back here with you. It seemed like everybody still had a great time when I hosted and when you hosted, but there's nothing better, in my opinion, than having us do this together. So I just wanted to say that.
All right, I agree. Could not agree more.
All right. So the first thing that I wanted to cover that I think is fairly new, and at least up to this point, maybe there have been some posts about it. I've seen some tweets and LinkedIn posts and things like that, but I haven't come across any blog posts or anything. Let me show you. There are some new local administrator settings in Entra. So if I go to the Entra Admin Center and go to Devices and All Devices and Device Settings, this is where typically we are configuring who in our organization are allowed to join devices to Entra, who can register devices, things like that. But down here, this looks a little bit different to me, Johan, because all we had here previously was this link: manage additional local administrators on all Microsoft Entra joined devices. And this link allowed us to add a user or a group that would be an admin on every single device that is joined to your tenant by default. But these two settings right here are very interesting. The other role that is added by default, at least up to this point in time, is a global administrator role. So when a user joins their device to an Entra ID tenant, the global administrator role is one of the roles that's added as a local admin on your device. We now have the option to shut that off, which is interesting, I think. We also have this new setting here: registering user is added as local administrator on the device during an Entra join. So by default, the third thing that gets added when somebody joins to the local administrators group, when somebody joins the device to Entra, is the person joining the device. We can now set that to none, or a selected group of users will still be added as a local admin after they've joined the device. So some of the questions I've seen pop up is, how does this interact with our settings in Autopilot? In Autopilot, we've been able to configure whether or not the user going through the enrollment process is a local admin at the end of that process or not, or just a standard user. We have not had this control for just simply joining a device to Entra.
I wonder if this is when you just use the Access Work or School wizard.
That's a great question. That would be my assumption. I'm sure that this question has been answered already, but I have not seen an answer to it. I personally have not seen the answer to it yet. But at any rate, another option to control these default settings, I think you and I would probably argue is a good thing.
Shiny. Yeah.
Love it. So that is not the only thing new this week, though. Microsoft Intune 2403 was released. I'm still in my brain mixing up. I keep wanting to say 2304. But 2403 was released, and we've had a few things come out with Intune that I just wanted to point out to everybody. As usual, this What's New page is a little bit longer than some of the highlights, but I did want to highlight Copilot in Intune is now available as a public preview. Interested to check that out and see what that's going to be able to do for us. I believe Security Copilot was also finally released as a public preview. Is that correct? Did you hear that?
Yes, and there were some discussions I saw. People are asking, okay, what will be the cost for it? Because there were these secure compute units, or SCU, whatever they call it. They were quite pricey, and the estimates on the website shows up in even just having one of those units running for a month was a good $2,000.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Shows up in the estimate for the service. So I have no idea if that will be the cost or how this play out. But there were a lot of folks in the community speculating. Okay, wow, should I turn this on? What will happen?
Yeah, interesting. Well, curious to hear more about that for sure.
Yeah. So if anyone happen to know that the real cost for playing around with this, even in a smaller tenant, by all means, let us know.
Yes, please. A couple of other things I wanted to highlight as I get down here. Some new Windows settings, catalog settings. I did notice, and I wanted to point these out to you, sir. Several delivery optimization settings have been added.
That is, of course, shiny.
Of course it is. Anything that we can do to control and work with DO. We also had, where is it? There it is. The security baseline for Windows 11 23H2 was released with this service release. So we've been waiting on this baseline update for quite a while now. Happy to see this get added as well. This also, the new security baseline is based on settings, catalog settings, which is fantastic as well. We've talked about many times here on Office Hours over the last couple of years. Settings catalog is really has been the way forward for configuring settings in Intune. So happy to see that improvement as well. And then I thought I'd just give a brief show a brief bit about this section, improvements for Intune deployments of Microsoft Defender for Endpoint. So there are a few changes in the endpoint security setting, or pane rather, in the Intune Admin Center that add some new reporting visibility into our dashboard. So if I pop over there real quick and go to endpoint security, you'll see we have a couple of new visible reports here right on the dashboard showing the number of Windows devices onboarded to Defender for Endpoint, which if you are using Defender for Endpoint in your environment is fantastic. If you are using an alternative, maybe that's information you don't want to see, but nevertheless it's there, as well as the antivirus agent status. And I think over here on, yes, the endpoint detection response page, some improvements here that also show that similar data. So you have that reporting on whether or not your devices have been onboarded into Defender, which if you're in this pane, you likely are using Defender. So I just like this top level at a glance type of visibility that we have available to us here. So I wanted to just call that out as those are a few highlights on the quite large 2403 Intune service release. Now, last but not least, I wanted to bring up a blog post from Michael Niehaus. As a side note, I talked a little bit last week about the Azure AD PowerShell module and the MS Online PowerShell module being deprecated. That happened Monday, by the way. So if you're still using those PowerShell modules, please update to the Microsoft Graph SDK. But in a similar vein, many of our old Intune scripts used a well-known PowerShell or a well-known Entra registered application ID that's been around for, I don't know, would you say years, Johan? That essentially all of our tenants had this application ID. So if you had an application secret or a user that had permissions into Intune, and along with this well-known ID, you would be able to pretty easily connect to a tenant and potentially elevate your credentials. With this application ID, as of April 1st, so Monday, that application was essentially going away. And you would have to create your own custom app ID. So you create your own app registration, generate your own secret, and the thought is that at least at that point, you're not using a well-known application ID. And hopefully, as Michael puts here in his blog post, in your app registration, you are restricting who in your tenant can actually use that app. And putting some additional security controls around how long that secret is made available and that sort of thing. So this has the potential to affect a lot of folks. If you're having some trouble with your Intune scripts this week, it's a possibility that this has something to do with it. But this was not all Michael wrote about over the weekend. I don't know if
he's been busy.
I'll just click back to his homepage here. You aren't kidding. He has been busy. All of these top posts have been put out since March 29th. So kudos to Michael. I don't know if one particularly interesting one that I saw was this one. I don't know if you happen to come across this one, Johan, but when does a Windows client sync with Intune? Because this can be confusing.
Especially with the no sync engine coming in as well for some of the newer features for endpoint privilege management.
Yeah.
Which has a very different sync schedule than the other stuff.
Definitely. It's one of those, it feels like what you always say is like the consulting answer, right? When does it, yeah, exactly. When does Windows client sync with Intune? It depends. We can be pretty sure that it's going to happen about every 8 hours, but also sometimes more than that.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
So another great post here. On that note, though, do you have anything that you'd like to share that you've come across over the last week?
Yeah, a few things. First, I learned about the existing of a PowerShell module that I didn't stumble across before, and obviously it was Niehaus that kind of led me into that direction and looking into it. I'm going to show that in a little bit.
Okay.
I had the fortune of being working with Niehaus today for a customer, doing some troubleshooting for delivery optimization, which is always fun. And I still have to pinch my arm, being like, all right, we're actually the same team now, working with the same customers. It's odd, but fun.
Yeah, incredible.
But in terms of news, I did stumble across I like to say, scathing or very harsh report against the security incident last summer. So it was, let me see if I can get a window open and actually share it at the same time. That is kind of pushing the limits, I think.
You can do it.
I decided to take a two-step approach in that one. But here we are.
There we go.
So it was the infamous storm something number incident last summer, and the Cyber Defense Agency just published a fairly lengthy report on this that you can download and or just view online for that matter. But they did not tread lightly on how they worded things. There was like, yeah, this should never have happened, and yes, they could have done better. And they, in this case, they're referring to Microsoft's own security organization. So, but it's a good read, very well written, a lot of facts, a lot of like, okay, this is what happened. And so this, of course, has been a major incident last year. And this week, or these last 2 weeks, the XC library is pretty scary. That was a close call. Could have been so much worse.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've read, it was basically a years-long social engineering attack against an open source GitHub repository. Really wild to see the details as people are starting to analyze them and figure out how this happened.
Yeah, and all the planning that went into it, like sneaking in change after change after change, that combined with a bunch of sample files actually led to a vulnerability. That is pretty crazy.
Yeah.
All right. I was really hoping for that we would also see the light of a new ConfigMgr release today, 2403, but that didn't happen. I was sad. But all right, Intune we have to use for now, and then see what happens with the ConfigMgr release. I just ordered myself another laptop on eBay, ThinkPad XS13S, X13S. Which has that little characteristic that it's an ARM device. So, and 24.3 is supposed to have ARM imaging support because the technical preview have it. Or the 2311 technical preview has it.
Oh, that's shiny.
It is shiny. So we'll see. I'll keep you posted
All right.
on that part. My trouble right now is to try to find a Ethernet dongle that is capable of pixie booting such device. And has drivers in WinP for it, so we'll see.
Interesting. Yeah, you have to keep us posted on that one too.
Yep. Anyhow, here I have a PowerShell prompt and an empty temp folder. And if I save that PowerShell module, delivery optimization troubleshooter, it's written one of the engineers at the Microsoft team. But if I save that script, obviously it shows up in the folder. I can go ahead and run it. And it has 3 different switches, the current version. There are rumors about upcoming versions, but for now, this is what they have. But I can run it for a regular health check. I can run it for peering. And I can run it to get some information about the connected CAS server. But even if I do just the health check one, it does run some quick, health checks about my device, making sure that the service is actually running, which is helpful. Checking how much memory I have, how much disk space I have, and then it does some configurations on a few different ports. And it also checks that my device actually can reach the CDN service that Microsoft has for this. What I learned earlier today, though, that this particular check here kind of lies a little bit because the script is actually doing a ping or the equivalent of a ping to these servers. And you can still have access to those, but not being able to do ping because some organizations is actually blocking it. So sure enough, we found an environment where they could be reached, but they could not be pinged. So this test said fail instead of success. So But that is not too hard to test yourself. You simply borrow one of these. You do a testnet connection. And I also learned that the good old test connection that the script uses to do the ping in PowerShell 7, you can specify a port.
Ooh.
In PowerShell 5 or Windows PowerShell, you cannot. So that's why I'm using testnet connection instead. But anyhow, that allows me to do a test connection and happiness. Anyhow, so that was I spent my part of my morning with, and then I spent the rest of my afternoon together with Mike Terrell arguing about with two PXE servers. Just to learn after a bit of troubleshooting, yep, both of them had their certificate expired today. Like, what are the odds? The one day we sit down to work with them, a 2-year cert decided to, nah.
You deserve a hug after having to deal with certs this afternoon. Yeah. I must say.
Good Lord, this is the worst. Anyhow, that's all I had for now. Do we have any questions?
Absolutely, we do. We have a hello from Amir as well. Good to see us back. Thank you for joining us.
Same.
Dan asked a question, what does that default do? I think when he asked that question, that was related to the two local administrator settings that I was referring to. So those two settings, if you want to share my screen again, Johan, just so I can point out which ones I'm referring to.
Yes, sir. When I find the cursor, I will.
Thank you. That looks like my screen.
Yeah.
This setting right here, by default, when a device is joined to Entra, the global administrator role, meaning anybody in the tenant that has that role, will be added as a local administrator on your device. The other one right here, registering user, is added as local administrator on the device during a join. If you go to settings, access work and school, and then join to Entra, by default, the user joining that device will also be added as a local administrator. So that's what these two things control. You can now set that to none for the global administrator role, so that role won't be added as a local admin. And then this one you can also set to only specific users are added as a local admin when they join the device. So pretty cool stuff. I mean, I think that does allow us, if the more and more I think about that, when you join, having global admin role be a local admin on every single device in your tenant,
I mean, it's great for a small lab. I don't mind that, but
manage it through your settings catalog, and you use your local administrator password solution as well.
Good old Windows Labs.
Yeah, that's right. So hope that answers your question, Dan. I think that's what you were asking about earlier. We've got another question here where someone reset security defaults on an HP device that is co-managed hybrid joined. Now when signing into any Microsoft apps, I get an error that the TPM has malfunctioned. Any thoughts on repairing this without a reimage? DS reg command and event logs are pretty unhappy about device keys.
I've only seen that when you like clear a TPM ship, that can really upset the enrollment settings.
Mm-hmm. From the times, I'll just talk a little bit from my experience. It's not going to be a full answer, just that Johan put it best. It can really mess up some things.
The only thing that comes to mind is try to do a force recovery. It's a switch that was added into the dsreg cmd command at some point. Not sure if it's available for Windows 10.
Dan's also suggesting sign out of work and school, then sign back in again. He's seeing that with motherboard replacements.
Yeah. I did a question mark for the dsreg command on a Windows 10 device. Did not have that option, but some of these commands don't always show all the options either.
Yeah, he said the force recovery fails with the same error thrown in the Microsoft apps.
Yeah. No, nothing that. No, nothing that comes to mind right away.
No, the easy button, although it's easy for me to say, is the reimage, I would say, if you can go that route. The times I've run into this, I've ended up in a more frustrating state than I was initially after dealing with Credential Manager and all of that. So, but Dan's suggestion as well, give that a try if you haven't already. Sign out of work and school and then sign back in again. And hopefully that will help. Gary's joining us today, asking if you still avoid Crucial MVMe drives. Apparently he needs some more storage for his labs. Is Samsung really the best way to go?
Yeah, stay away from Crucial. Samsung is one of the best options available. They are a few dollars more, yes, they are, but they're also 1,000% better. So you get what you pay for. I learned that the hard way. That was no fun.
Agreed. I'll double stamp that recommendation.
Yeah.
All right. Jamal is asking about SCCM going away once companies move towards Intune. Could you please shed some light on this? What are we seeing? I think we're seeing an it depends. Of course.
I mean, the answer is quite obvious in its own right. ConfigMgr is not going away. It's a product that's going to exist for many more years to come, because there are a lot of large customers using it, and they simply won't be able to switch overnight to something else. But it is very clear where Microsoft is putting all their, not all of them, but a lot of their investment money in terms of features. It's not in ConfigMgr. If you compare ConfigMgr today with what it was like 3 years ago, when David James was still leading the team, every single release, it was 3 times per year. It was just feature after feature after feature. Now the cadence has slowed down to 2 times per year, and the number of features for every release is less. Whereas Intune is getting like tons of new features every time. So that's where the focus is, and also where a lot of the growth is today. I mean, we said it many times here. Just on our academy alone, if you just look at students buying training, we have now 4 or 5 times the amount of students on our Intune trainings compared to our ConfigMgr trainings. That was not the case 3 years ago. Then we were more of a 50-50 split. And 5 years ago, there were like barely any Intune interest at all in terms of training, but that has exploded. That's an indication, I think. So it's not going away, but keep an eye on it, work with it, learn it, because it's that's where sort of the future directions are. That's where the investment is. That's my little take on it.
Very well said.
Thank you.
All right. So James had a follow-up comment on the motherboard replacements. Note that with motherboard replacements in our factory, when that happens, it's usually enough for the data stored within the OA3 data hash or the autopilot hash to be refreshed, re-added. So thanks for that tip, James.
Awesome.
Sarah is asking, is standalone WDS really no longer supported? What is the alternative, or what alternative is there to PXE-enabled distribution point? Networks are blocking TFTP download of boot.wim.
Well, that's also a bit of a depends. The only change that Microsoft has done in recent time for Windows Deployment Services is they are no longer allowing you to run setup exit from it. So like setup exit driven deployments from WDS, that's being blocked. But you can still use it to download any type of boot image that you want. It could be an MDT boot image, it can be a ConfigMgr boot image. If this is a ConfigMgr question in general, you have two PXE responders you can pick from. And in general, I prefer to pick the non-WDS based one because it's more lightweight and it can run on both servers and on clients. So basically, if I can steal the screen back here, there we are. If I go to one of my site servers and head over to my distribution point, that was the wrong one. This one here and this one. When this one here is selected, this checkbox, you still need to have this one selected, but this one also, then it doesn't install Windows Deployment Services, it installs a separate service. So if I go to that distribution point and head over to services, this is where you see the ConfigMgr responder PXE service. And again, that's in general a better PXE server than the WDS-based one. However, both of them are using TFTP. Both of them requires that client are configured to actually reach them and be able to download content from them. Interesting. I just noticed that Andrew's connection disconnected. Wonder if it's him or me.
Well, that is not right. No, that's me, and I bet I know what it is. I'm still here.
Okay, good. I just noticed that you became black and it started to make noises here, and but that's the beautiful thing about live. Anyhow, this responder still is a TFTP responder, and IP helpers or scope options need to configure for the clients to find the right server, and firewall ports to 6 that need to allow that download to happen. But that is not because of any recent restrictions in WDS. It's been like that since forever. I mean, obviously, I have two homes these days, as most of you know. I work part-time for Morolus, which is the company behind the academy and everything we do here. And then I have a home at 2 Point Software. And 2 Point Software, well, they sell PXE servers, better PXE servers that are downloading from HTTPS rather than TFTP. But these are paid solutions. This solution will set you back maybe $250 per client dollars per year, whereas the stuff that you have here is obviously part of ConfigMgr. You don't have to pay an extra license for it. So I don't think it's anything Microsoft blocked. I think something put it this way: in general, you have PXE build issues, except when it's certificates involved. It's the networking team's fault. That's usually what it comes down to. But there are a lot of things you can do to troubleshoot it. Usually, it's about seeing to your own castle a little bit first, making sure that your ConfigMgr environment is configured correctly for PXE. The next is to make sure the clients are finding the right or getting the right information from the switches, so they can find the PXE server, and that there are no firewalls blocking the downloads. So.
And this is one of the many reasons we bring our networking team donuts.
Yeah. And whiskey for Christmas, yeah.
That's right. Fantastic. All right. Dan just had a comment about the Samsung firmware bug that had some. There was a bug in some of the Samsung SSDs, or the firmware version rather, where he had a couple of those die in a RAID 5 setup.
There was some discs released last year where they issued an emergency update for those discs. I was lucky; I didn't have any that died for me, but I know there were folks that had either them not being happy at all or very, very degraded performance. But I haven't seen that happen since.
Yeah, same. I was fortunate enough that when that happened, I think all of the firmware versions had already been patched on mine, essentially. All right, and then James is asking if I had any chance or had any luck finding if there was a non-MDM or non-URI OMA method to update a single pinned entry for the taskbar or start menu. Excuse me. No, I have not. So most of what I have dealt with or talk about are essentially doing some of the classic methods where you are creating your start menu, exporting the entire layout, and that sort of thing. But for that specific scenario, I don't think I have a solution. Have you come across anything more than just the export layout and things like that, Johan?
No, sir, have not.
Okay. So sorry, James. This has been a shared frustration in the community. I must say, you'll find plenty of posts and comments about how a lot of organizations would prefer that they had more control over the start menu and taskbar than we do today. I'll say that.
Yeah, I saw both Mike and Gary were, first of all, saying hello to each other, but also commenting on PXE is not the only option of downloading boot images. And you can combine it too. I made a blog post a while ago where you can basically, this was for HP devices, but with the right payload on the right HP device, you can actually tell it where to go get a boot image from. And when you enter factory mode on that device by pressing F11 instead of F12, you have the option to either boot from a network or from a boot image that is on the hard drive itself. And by hard drive, I don't mean the regular hard drive. I mean a separate cache disk that is on these devices that you normally don't see from Windows, but you will see if you hit F11. It shows up as a separate disk. It's a 32 gig flash drive. And that will allow you to download a boot image that way to the device. But this is obviously, each vendor has their own little flavor of this. HP was the first one that I stumbled across that actually allowed you to fairly, I wouldn't say super easy because it took me a few days to get this one working, the script here, but you can configure that payload, which I was very happy for. So anyhow, good comment there. Thank you, Gary.
Yeah,
All right.
fantastic. Dan was asking if we use a hardware validation script to determine if a device can support Windows 11, and if not, give a notice to the tech.
I haven't run that script during deployment time, but there are scripts that you can download, or a script you can download. It's been available for a while. It's the hardware readiness script. So this one here, you can see the URL if I copy that one open to Notepad or something clever. Just this a link here. But if I run that script on this particular machine, it's going to open up a blank PowerShell prompt. I did save it out earlier at some point. It's going to argue and say that, no, this machine is absolutely not capable. And the reason it's not capable in my case is that it didn't like the TPM version I was on, and it didn't like my CPU at all. So the CPU actually failed. But if I take the exact same script, I ramp over to one of my more updated devices or newer devices. Let's see where I put that little script. Apparently not there. But I know a skilled copy-paste person. Apparently I'm better than on that than typing, but I'm getting there.
Fewer keys to hit.
Yeah. So downloading that and run it on this device. It's going to say that it's much happier because now it has a CPU that actually is okay, and it has a TPM that is version 2 instead of version 1.2 that will pass. As usual, all these scripts and the ConfigMgr inventory, the Intune inventory, it only reports what it sees, not what it's capable of. So, for example, you can't see it here, but I have a gaming rig next to me. When I run the script on that rig, it says, no, you cannot run Windows 11 because you don't have a TPM. Yeah, but I did. It was just not enabled in BIOS. And it was a virtual TPM that was connected to the CPU. And after enable that one, sure enough, it would show me that, yeah, it will run Windows 11. So don't be too sad if you run something like this in your environment or at deployment time or whatever, or if you're using the ready-made inventory in ConfigMgr to report on things. The number you see may not be true. It may simply mean that, yeah, if you have 10,000 devices, you need to do a BIOS configuration on. So get on those sneakers and run. Book it. Or create a package and deploy it. Or a script that configures BIOS.
Good option.
Well, that's running.
Right. Well, maybe unless you need to get your steps in,
Yeah, I could use a little bit of walking for sure. Added a few pounds here.
You and me both. Too funny. Yeah, Dan was saying he was just planning on using that script, but trying to figure out how to pass that output to an MDT sequence.
I mean, the output's in a sort of a JSON-like format, but there are some stuff in it. It's like JSON in JSON with semicolons and what stuff in it. So it's not too easy to parse. But if you want to learn something about interesting PowerShell, open this script in an editor of choice and take a look, because the data they are gathering here is actually quite creative. And I even saw that Gary borrowed part of this and made his own version of a readiness script where he output the format or data differently. I found that on his repository the other day. So of course you can change it. I just don't know if this one will run in WinPE. If only there was a way to find out.
If only.
If only. Let's find out.
I was going to say,
what can go wrong with a live demo?
That's right.
Absolutely nothing.
No. Well, the good thing is, to prove that theory, surely you know a guy that can instantly load a device into WinPE.
Yeah, that I should be capable of. I've seen it done many times before. So I'm just copying that script up to one of my servers. I will head back to my boot image that I started here. It's not the latest, but it is a supported version of WinPE, so that is always good. In general, I recommend folks to stay away from 23H2 version of WinPE because it's not great. Someone pulled the trigger a little bit too quick on that one.
Gary just added in here, the default one will fail on TPM.
There you go. Then we shall see that very shortly.
That's right.
Probably need some sort of execution policy here. I probably need PowerShell too. Good Lord. And PowerShell is only 1R. Last time I checked.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Pretty sure. All right, try again. Set execution policy. Good luck on setting that from a command prompt. No, force, beautiful. Hardware readiness. Hey, boom. Well, it ran for sure. It didn't figure out the hard drive because I do have a hard drive, but it's not formatted at this point. So the script didn't like that, but of course you can change it. CPU it didn't like either because I'm running this on my host, and the host CPU basically goes through into WinPE. So if it doesn't work in the host, it won't work in WinPE either. So, but I mean, you can definitely borrowing some checks of this from the script and used in your deployment process. But please note also that these checks are usually only enforced when you do upgrades. When you deploy Windows 11, you're not running setup. You're applying a Vim file from a boot image. DSM or whatever you're applying with don't care. Windows 11 don't care. So you can definitely deploy it to a device. Whether you can continue to upgrade that device later on, that's a different story. You can still deploy it. I deploy hundreds of Windows 11 devices on this workstation, even though it does not support Windows 11. I cannot just do an upgrade to Windows 11 on it, or 20 VM running on it because of the CPU. Even if I convince it not to stop because of it, it won't run. Normally you can set a registry key and say, hey, do it anyway, but not on this one. So, yeah. Anyhow, right. Research is fun.
Oh, yes. Looks like Dan was going right alongside you at the same time here in the comments, and he got TPM undetermined on a Lenovo in Windows PE. So,
yeah,
it's what looks like what we expected.
yeah. The thing is, there are often vendor-based tools that you can run in WinPE that give a lot more insight to the hardware than maybe the native PowerShell in WinPE offers. So all the major vendors has it, HP, Dell, Lenovo, etc. You can run their configuration tools and make an estimated guess of depending what they put out.
Yep. Oh, I hear Kylo back there.
Yeah, he's snoring in the corner. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
He woke up when you mentioned TPM there, so.
I knew that would get him up. I knew it. Just a couple of follow-up comments while we're still on the topic. Gary mentioned get-tpm commandlet isn't in WinPE, and when he rewrote the script to work in PE, it was using get sim instance.
As you do.
Of course. All right. We did have a question here. I want to make sure we don't miss it. Jamal was asking, do you prefer using the Windows internal database, WID, over a SQL database for WSUS? If you wouldn't, then would you convert an existing WID to SQL DB?
I do not recommend using Windows internal databases. I recommend using a full SQL for WSUS. If you're a ConfigMgr customer, you actually get a license for it. It's one of the very few databases that you do get a license for with Config Manager. So Config Manager includes a SQL, but that SQL is limited. It's a standard version. Plus, you can't use it for any type of database, but you can use it for WSUS. So I recommend to use that one. Absolutely, any day. And it's not too terrible to migrate over, but usually that will be basically start over instead. It's easier. Could probably use a refresh anyway. The WSUS database.
Definitely. It's kind of like, back in the days where it was, I haven't reimaged my device for a couple of years. I probably need to do it just to clean some stuff up. WSUS database is similar.
Yeah, no, not going to argue with you there.
I guess I should also clarify that's not an official recommendation to go redo your SUSDB right now. Just like you said, it wouldn't hurt.
All right. Curious if Gary actually had published a script that does that sim instance thing. That is always fun to see. He has published a lot. So Gary, TPM, and sim instance with a dash and language PowerShell. Nope, not with Gary in the name at least. Good Lord. Should I learn my PowerShell commands? Okay, a few. 500 code samples. And the first one is Gary.
That's awesome.
I bet one of these samples will work in WinPE.
So I think I found it. It's called Get Win 11 Readiness.
Get machine info. This one here.
It's. I wonder if that's the same one. It's just in the OSD.
Well, it does say
Yep.
changed. Yeah.
Yep.
I'll say we have it.
That one's just it's a function.
All right.
Awesome.
Thank you, Gary.
Yes, thank you very much. All right. I think we've got time for one last question here. And this is a question that I am not even going to attempt to answer, and this is all you. I'm revisiting SCCM after many years and wondering how reliable is peer-to-peer for reducing or eliminating distribution points.
Very. I mean, like any solution, peering over time, there are bugs that are detected and gets fixed. 2 years back, for example, there was a bug in the branch cache publication database that made it not serve requests from clients, and Microsoft fixed that bug eventually. But we have so many customers that are using peer-to-peer on a daily basis. Large customers, hundreds of thousands of clients using peering. They would not do that if it didn't work. Windows itself is using peering. Delivery optimization, as we mentioned earlier in this call, is a big one. And there is more and more content leveraging that protocol, sometimes without the peering part, but the protocol is there. And the more of that you can work with, the better. It helps you reduce the infrastructure. I feel sorry for the poor admin that had to deal with hundreds and hundreds of distribution points where they would probably get away with 5 and just enable something that you already paid for in the product. The challenge with peering is that it's kind of hard to troubleshoot, and Microsoft doesn't really offer any good management or visualizations layer to it. Luckily, that's why 2.0 exists as a company to provide that. So, but the underlying stack, solid. So highly recommend it.
I knew you'd have some thoughts on that.
Yep.
Fantastic.
All right, then. I think that means we are up, and dang, time flies when you're having fun.
Yes, it does.
All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. Thank you for the many great questions and comments and interaction here in the chat. Andrew, good to have you back. Good to be back. And I'll see you next week.
Likewise. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Johan. Have a great one.